It was a pleasure for our family to be involved in Uncle's last few months of life. Till 6 weeks ago, maybe 6 weeks. How old is the baby?
7.
7? Yeah. Till 7 weeks ago, I held the record of knowing Solomon for the shortest time. Yeah. When my family. Yeah. So we moved to Perth last year, and the day I met Solomon, it felt as if this was one of my long lost brothers, and it felt as if I had always known him. And same with my wife and children, with this family, they felt the same way. So it was a pleasure for us to be involved with the family and pray with them and go through this crisis. God brings people into our lives in accordance to His will and perfect plan. I had a few conversations with Uncle, and same, the familiarity, jumped up one generation, and we felt the same with your dad as well. We thought we knew him all our lives and that he was our own father or grandfather, the children. There were 3 things I noticed about Uncle during our conversations with him on the telephone, on the FaceTime and WhatsApp video calls. The first thing I noticed about Uncle, he was in a lot of distress. He had a lot of itching and he was in a lot of distress. But when we had the conversation with him, he was so joyful and he was so thankful. He was so joyful and thankful. That's the first thing I noticed about him. It's very easy to be joyful when things are going okay. Not when. Probably Uncle had his intuition that this was the last few weeks or months in his life. But that's amazing. That's one thing I learned from Uncle, to be joyful and thankful no matter what the situation was. The second thing I learned about him was that he was very humorous, and he would convey a message through that humor. When we had a short devotion with him on the telephone, and we read from Psalm 121, I lift up my eyes into the hills, where does my help come from? And it goes on to say, he who watches over you will not slumber. He who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. And each one of us shared a little bit about the entire chapter, but regarding those 2 verses, Uncle brought out an amazing, humorous, but a very powerful point. He said, why the Lord doesn't sleep even for a second is, see, you guys are in Australia. When you are asleep, we are awake. Or when we are awake, you are asleep. And we have some relatives in the US. And when they are asleep, we are awake, and so on. So at some point in time on this earth, there is somebody who is awake and who needs God's mercies. And Uncle said, that's the reason why God doesn't sleep or slumber. Amazing, right? Yeah. 360 degrees God. 24/7 God. What an amazing God we serve. Through that, it was a little bit humorous, but it was very powerful. That combination, is very... If you see some of the great preachers, they will have that combination with them. Humor and very deep philosophy, very deep thoughts. The third thing I realized about Uncle is this balance, that I know that he is, from the fact that I said that he is joyful and that he was happy no matter what, and he was thankful no matter what the circumstance was, that he was very humble on the one hand, that he was dependent on God. So that's the one end of the spectrum in the third point that I noticed about Uncle. And the other thing was what I deduced. I deduced that Uncle would have been a very tough man. When I realized that, I realized that when I met Solomon, because I know Solomon was a tough guy, and he's a tough guy, and to have raised him up, Uncle would have been double tough. So Uncle is that officer and a gentleman, a loving, humorous man on the one side, and a tough man on the other side. And these extremes are possible to be balanced only when the pivot is Jesus Christ. Hallelujah.
Amen.
And these are the things I learned from Uncle, and I want you guys to learn as well. Because, when I met Uncle, this thought was in my mind. Like Paul writes, you know, we try to imitate Jesus, that he is our role model, he's number one. But Paul says, if you are not able to imitate Jesus, you imitate me. So when I talked to Uncle and when I heard about the various aspects and various things about Uncle, I realized, wow, we haven't seen Paul, but we have seen Uncle. I have seen Uncle on WhatsApp video call. How good it will be if we can try to copy Uncle. Of course, Jesus is our role model, number one. But just like Paul said, and we didn't see Paul, we see Uncle. Why don't we try and copy Uncle? Humility, humor, you know, that absolute trust in God, these are very rare commodities, and we ought to ask God to help us, to fill us with all those things. And from all what I've heard, from what Rick and Hepsi have shared, it's very nice to hear. And all the utensils being filled with water, I was reminded of Psalm 23, my cup overflows. Amen. Uncle's cup was overflowing, so he wanted your cups to overflow. You know, sometimes we might want to have tea or coffee. I was thinking, how would Rick had some tea, because or even the cups would have been full of water. But that's what is essential. You can live without tea, but you can't live without water. So my cup overflows is something that is real in Uncle, and that's why he filled up all your containers. Amazing. Amen. And that should be our prayer too. Lord Jesus, that, you know, to our God, that our cups should be full, so that we will go forth and back to fill other people's cups. And that quality of Uncle has rubbed off onto Solomon. Yeah? When I met him, I thought Rosalind was very hospitable, and so that quality would have rubbed off from Rosalind. This is my preparation, so that next time I come here, I get my tea and my snacks. But this has been passed on genetically from Uncle. And no good character is genetic unless it is nurtured and unless it is practiced. And that's what Solomon is doing. And it's amazing. And we look at Michael and Gabby. I shouldn't be saying too much because the boys are listening. But they're an encouragement too. And I was so glad. Manjira and I were always discussing, and we were wondering whether we were giving the right advice to you guys. Because once we told them to, when the doctor said they were 6 months or so, we told them, no, now is the time to go and see. And every such decision involves a lot of money. Tell me when my time is over.
It's stretchable time.
Okay. Every decision involves a lot of money. So we were praying about this family, about Uncle, and about every decision. Because they were just blindly following us. I mean, if we told them to do something, they were just about to do it. So that put a little burden on us, but that was a privilege to bear that burden. Because what's the point having family and friends when you can't bear their burdens? And Manjira, when we got the message initially, when we got the message about Uncle not being well, Manjira got a dream. She gets dreams early in the morning, around 5, and those are always revelations from God. And in that dream, the news was not good. But somehow we didn't tell the family. We thought it was good that we kept it. But some of our decisions, it's because God showed Manjira and didn't show Solomon. Because we were the sort of physical driving force here. And some of the decisions that we were telling you to take were based on that, the foreknowledge of that. And I'm thankful to God for that. Because that eased our stress a bit. Yeah, so thank you for giving me this time to share. It's a privilege to be part of this family. It was a privilege to know Uncle. And I hope I know and I hope that you will continue to carry this great torch that he has actually lit and has passed on through the generation. And I'm sure Gabby and Michael are going to take it and pass it on as well. Thank you.
Thanks.